deal? What up, though? What up? This is I Really Mean a Show podcast and your host, R.G.B, the very best in Memphis from the very best in Memphis. Got our new intro. What y'all think about that? Y'all like that? Our new intro to the show. I love it. Shout out to some great artists that will be named at some point on the show. We'll actually have them on the show, but whip that up for me real quick. Hope y'all like it. Give us feedback. I Really Mean a Show podcast. You can hear us every Friday with new episodes on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio. But man, we want to get right to it. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday. This is September the 29th, 2017. A few topics I want to get to. The new Edge Alley, y'all, came out here recently. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it in the Edge District here in Memphis. We want to talk some about NBA training camp for those that are NBA fans. We want to talk a little bit about some of the moves that were made over the summer and the off season, and a lot of the training camps got underway as teams prepare for the 2017-2018 season. We want to talk about these moves, how they relate to the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, y'all know I'm a Laker fan, so don't play, but in Memphis, we do talk about the Grizzlies, and I am a Grizzlies supporter. And so we want to talk about some of the moves the Grizzlies made and how these moves with other teams and moves they made are going to affect this upcoming season. Then I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about business banking. For those that have a business or an organization, it's important that you have your business banking tight and you have a relationship with the banker, whether personal or with your business. You need to have a relationship with your banker and the institution that your banker is with. They need to know who you are, and there's a certain way you need to position yourself and have a knowledge and be able to articulate about your business. So I want to talk about that to help out those that are looking to start businesses, those that have been in business for a long time, those who may be frustrated with their banking relationship. I'm going to help you on today. And then last, I want to get into reuniting the United States. Or in some cases, for some people, uniting it actually for the first time and putting the United in United States. There's been a lot of controversy, y'all, with President Donald Trump and some of his comments on last weekend. The National Football League, the NFL, had their situation on how people protested or didn't protest and whatnot on last weekend. I'm sure there's going to be more coming up this coming weekend. NFL owners and things like that got involved. There's a lot of controversy back and forth as to criticizing who's on what side. And it seems like more and more the country becomes more divisive as people have more of a hard stance on things, and they're not really interested in hearing other perspectives. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to incorporate some very interesting interviews that we heard on this week. So just laying out the basis of the show. You can subscribe to this show, again, iTunes, YouTube, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, on Facebook, on the Facebook page. I Really Mean It with R.G.B. So let's get right into it. The Edge Alley opened up, and you can actually visit it at www.edge-alley.com. The Edge Alley's in the Edge District. Man, it's really an exciting place. If you haven't had a chance to go check it out, they got a really cool coffee shop with some really distinct and diverse coffees that come from all over the world. They have a really nice community space. And then there's four retail shops. This is over on Monroe, if you think in the Edge District. And for those that aren't in Memphis, or if you're in Memphis and you don't really get around that much, the Edge District is kind of that area that's kind of tucked away between downtown. So the heart of downtown, which kind of unofficially kind of starts at Danny Thomas and goes west up to the Mississippi River here in Memphis. And then you have the Midtown area, which kind of starts officially, unofficially again around Highland, Poplar Highland, and then comes west and kind of gets right up to Danny Thomas and whatnot. And, everybody's got their different definitions on some of the different areas. But the Edge District is kind of that area wedged between Midtown and downtown that oftentimes and in many cities gets forgotten because you get municipal investment into downtown areas for downtown cores. And then a lot of times that trickles around edge areas and gets right to midtown areas where you have investment in a little bit more residential, a little bit more of an eclectic kind of population. You know what I mean? So, with investment in the edge area, there's been a lot of it here over the last couple years with St. Jude kind of stretching into the area. You've got the medical district with Methodist and Le Bonheur and whatnot, Baptist, they're all in that area. You've had financial institutions come in the area and things like that. And then you've got UT Health, which is the University of Tennessee arm that's here in Memphis that provides kind of medical edification from a post-secondary standpoint. And so all this is housed in the Edge District area of Memphis, Tennessee. And man, what's starting to catch up now is as there's a demand for population, as students and people on residence and doctors and, vendors and everybody that's associated with a lot of the businesses in the area, now you're starting to get a demand for that work, life, and play kind of setup and scenario. And so the Edge Alley is one of those investments that's been made in one of the buildings there on Monroe. And again, you can visit the website and check that out. But really wanted to mention it to this audience because there is going to be more investment in that from a collaborative standpoint. There'll be more financial institutions that seek to come into the area, other rehabbing of existing buildings. And if y'all think, the buildings that are over on Union, where the commercial appeal is and whatnot, a lot of dilapidated buildings come in there from Southwest before you get to Danny Thomas. There are people buying up those buildings every day looking for ways to invest in the area and bring some more residential and some more fun kind of things, restaurants, bars. The Medical District Collaborative with Tommy Pacello and his entire team, Abby. They're fantastic, great people over there. And man, it's really cool to see some of that investment in the Edge District. You've got Mike Todd and that whole team over there. They did the Alley is Lit or the Edge is Lit event back earlier this year. I'm sure they're going to do that again for 2018. So if you're not aware and haven't heard much about the Edge District, go check it out. Read up on it. There's a lot of great efforts there and all around the city. And again, I always challenge us from a critical thinking standpoint to look at areas beyond just the core of Poplar and Walnut Grove, right? North Memphis, South Memphis, Westwood, Orange Mound, Whitehaven, Hickory Hill, Southwind area. We don't want to forget about these areas, y'all. Raleigh, Fraser. You're right. So let's make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for demanding investment in these other areas of the greater Memphis area as well. So check out Edge Alley, edge-alley.com. All right? All minds clear on that? All right, so let's get into NBA training camp. And so, man, it's been a wild ass off season in the NBA. Everybody's moving around. You got Russell Westbrook, as late as today, signing the big contract with Oklahoma City. You've got Steph Curry signing a deal in Golden State. Golden State still looking strong. Yeah, Paul George leaves the Indiana Pacers, signed with Oklahoma City. Carmelo Anthony leaves New York Knicks and joins Oklahoma City. Paul Millsap left Atlanta and went to Denver. You had Kyrie Irving and the controversy between him and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and specifically with LeBron James, that was kind of hyped up through July and through August. he ends up actually in Boston, traded for Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder and that sort of thing, second round picks. Isaiah Thomas, who averaged 28, 29 points a game last year and was just fantastic for Boston, man, is now in Cleveland. Derrick Rose is now in Cleveland. I mean, Dwayne Wade is now in Cleveland. And then you get to the Grizzlies. And man, the Grizzlies are going to look strong. They're going to be younger this year and whatnot, but no Zach Randolph, no Tony Allen. Those were the guys, man, that made up that grit and grind. And so, from a fan standpoint, there's a little bit of disappointment and maybe a little disheartened feelings with some long-term vets that helped create some of the most recent culture with the Memphis Grizzlies are no longer here, man. So, it's looking to be a pretty interesting season in terms of what the NBA is going to look like. You've got Chris Paul that joined James Harden down in Houston. You've got some rookies that are coming in that people are really high on. A couple of them in Boston, and of course the Lonzo Ball kind of deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. Man, my Lakers. I'm a Lakers supporter as well, and Magic Johnson seems to be high on Lonzo Ball, and they're hoping that he can come in and kind of be the beginnings of some building blocks to get them back out of the cellar that they've been in the last several seasons. So NBA is going to be very interesting, and they're kind of stepping ahead of the NFL, man. The NFL keeps kind of stepping on their toe with a lot of these different things that are coming up and, whatnot, and, the whole deal with the owners and the commissioner, Roger Goodell, and all that. So the NBA is really stepping their game up and really seems like they're really supporting some of the diverse approach to sports. Right, and they have a little bit more of a grassroots touch, and then the whole injury thing, man, with the NFL has just been crazy. With the CTEs and all this kind of stuff. Aaron Hernandez was found to be having allegedly in the late stages of CTE that the brain trauma that supposedly he suffered while playing in the NFL, and trying to determine, hell, at the end of the day, did that impact some of his decision making that ultimately led to deaths of other people allegedly, and then certainly the death of himself. So anyway, I want y'all to hear from an interview, kind of local sports enthusiast. He's with the Grizzlies, Chris Vernon. You can actually hear his podcast, The Chris Vernon Show, on a daily basis on some of the different platforms that we're on. With I Really Mean It. But I want you to hear his interview with Grizzlies coach David Fizdale, which I actually had a chance. Let me take a step back, y'all, because I didn't say that on last Saturday I had a chance to participate with Mike Conley's Bola Bash. And man, several Grizzlies came out. Coach Fizdale came, showed a lot of love, man, took pictures with fans. And I really just want to say this, man, that all the guys were class acts, man. Wayne Sheldon, was out there. Some of the young guys were out there. Coach Fizdale, and definitely, shout out to Mike Conley. And the whole idea behind the benefit was for the Methodist Sickle Cell Center. And so anybody that's been impacted by sickle cell, whether it's children or other family members and whatnot, how tough and how frustrating and how impactful that can be on an individual and on a family. And so when I got a chance to support it from a bowling standpoint, from a opportunity to meet people who've been impacted by the disease and whatnot, and be able to share good words and kind of direct people to additional resources, man, I love to do that. And I'm really thankful for that opportunity on last Saturday. But anyway, I want you to hear from Coach Fizdale now on some of the moves that the Grizzlies are making and how they're going to look this season. So check out Coach.
Nate.
And Mark.
And Mark, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And Tyreek will be the first kid off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what position it'll be at.
Right. Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see because I do think that there are more dynamic options. And you know what? We can keep asking one another the questions and not get the real answers, or we can get the real answers from the man himself.
Real
right
answers. Hey, brother, how's it going?
Coach David Fisdale. Back.
Here we go.
Year 2.
He was asking me about what are the biggest questions. I said one of the first is the backup point guard thing, right? He's got all these guys that are going to be coming into training camp, and we were discussing when Conley comes out in game number 1, who checks in. I think it's right. You still got to figure it out.
Yeah,
it's not a certain thing right now.
Yeah, and I love the competition. You know, I got some great options there to look at. All these guys have big-time summers. It's just going to be a matter of who wants it the most and what fits the best to the style of play that we want to play.
Fizz, you talked about, coming out of last season, the priority was going to be about athleticism, speed, shooting.
Yes.
And you feel like, and basically versatility on that wing. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like with some of the changes that have been made this offseason, you lost some key veterans,
right?
But you replaced them with some guys that sort of fit what you wanted to see moving forward with where this franchise is headed?
Yeah, I really thought the front office did a great job of adding some multi-dimensional players, guys that can do multiple things out there. I really do feel like we're faster. We're definitely more skilled from that standpoint. And I do think that we added some shooting with Ben and Rio and Tyreek being an improved three-point shooter. So I'm excited about this group. Obviously last year was a great learning curve for me, a good test for me. We will obviously miss Zebo, TA, and Vince. I don't know if you can replace that. Just the gravitas and just their presence and their contributions. I don't know if you can replace that. So I have to give this team its own identity, its own chance, and try to put these guys in a position to be as successful as possible.
You talked about how much you learned last year. You work your whole life to get a head coaching gig. Yeah. So it's all a whirlwind, and then you're done with the playoffs, and all that stuff happens in the playoffs, the Spurs series, and then it's done. Right?
Yeah.
It's vacation. So as you reflect on that first year and your biggest takeaways or things that were different than maybe what you expected them to be as a head coach.
Well, I felt like last year I tried to impose my will on too many things. And it was, there's certain aspects of this game and certain aspects of the team that need to grow organically and can't be forced. And so I really tried to evaluate myself very hard and really take a hard look at myself and where I had shortcomings, but also at the same time not lose what I thought I did well. And so coming into the season, I just felt like I got a better grasp of how to attack this thing, knowing when to step back, knowing when to step forward. And I'm really excited for the challenge.
As you talked about, obviously evolving as a team, but you're evolving as well as a coach. I wanted to ask you specifically going into tomorrow, where do you stand with the health questions of Chandler? A guy like Tyreek obviously has had some conditioning things. Mario Chalmers, where are those guys in terms of how you phase those guys in?
Well, Mario's been here and Tyreek's been here, and these guys are rolling. I mean, they've had an incredible summer. They're in great shape. These guys just ran the conditioning test, which is not easy, and they passed it. And they passed it easily. And so it just goes to show you the commitment that they made over the summer. Chandler passed the conditioning test. He's way further ahead this year than he was last year coming into camp. But obviously you won't know with Chandler until the hitting starts, and you won't know with Mario until the hitting starts. So I'm looking forward to training camp and throwing these guys in the fire and seeing where they're at.
One of the things about this particular team different than the past is you kind of had guys that have been playing together for 6-7 years. You still got Mike, you still got Mark.
Right.
Everybody else is like a question mark in terms of figuring out. You have been with franchises, like when you were with Miami, you guys did the whole roster overhaul. Sometimes it was getting superstars to be able to play together. And it starts off rough, right? And so everybody is going to want things to be great immediately, especially after you get rid of fan favorites. But just from your experiences in the past when you've had roster overhaul and dealt with it, how long does it typically take in your mind, or do you have an expectation of how long it'll take?
Honestly, I want to get off to a fast start. And so I'm challenging this team to pick up things quickly. Obviously, we have a heck of a coaching staff that's going to be implementing the stuff that's important to us. But every team's different that way. When we first got the big three in Miami, just getting those big personalities and guys that's used to having the ball full time to actually share was a challenge. And we knew that was going to be a challenge going into it. But you also look at that team, and our defense was number one in the league. We were an incredible defensive team, and that's what we emphasized in training camp. And once it all came together, it was downhill for the rest of the league from there. So, we also went through the challenge of losing those guys and having to reboot from there and get back to becoming a playoff team and really competing at a high level. And that was a great challenge, and that team picked it up a little bit faster, actually. And so, every team's different. I think that we spent so much time with these guys this summer. It's one of the greatest summers of development I've ever been a part of, if not the best summer of development I've ever been a part of. And so I'm expecting these guys to hit the ground running. Systematically, it fits them. And so I think they'll enjoy playing in it, which always makes things move faster.
Fizz, the defending champion Golden State Warriors obviously stood pat and kept a dynamic team together.
Yeah.
Everyone else in the West, though, reloaded, loaded up. I mean, Carmelo Anthony just obviously came over to Oklahoma City. What do you think about the West and the dynamic in the West? Now, how much tougher is it even more next year than it was last year?
I love it.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy, but that's the whole reason you do this is for the competition. It really, the challenge of how do we overcome that, even though we don't have maybe as many big names. Again, that's why it's a team sport. I plan on building a system and a culture here that has longevity, that creates winning. Wins and losses aren't always in just the name or the talent. It's all of the gray areas and all of the in-between areas of preparation, of conditioning, of togetherness. And obviously you do have to have some talent, and I think our big guns are pretty talented. So I'm looking forward to that challenge.
Who's kind of stood out to you already from the young guys? I mean, you were a guy that came in here last year when you got the job, and you were like, listen, I love playing young guys. Like, Coach, you have no choice now.
Pretty much that's what I'm doing.
Look around the locker room.
Yeah.
You don't have much of a choice. You're playing young guys.
Yeah, and I thought Wayne Selden had an incredible summer. I thought Wade Baldwin took a huge jump this summer. I think we saw that in Summer League. It's funny how summers work because over the last month now, Deontay Davis is starting to really show up in our workouts and in our pickup games and really starting to show signs of being an elite rim defender, elite rebounder, and a guy that can really take our motor to another level. I thought Jarrell Martin made some huge strides in this last month of the summer where you're really starting to see his talent blossom. Andrew Harrison also had a big summer of improvement. So when you see that, those kind of jumps in guys, it gives you confidence to put them in the game. And the fact that all of these guys were available this summer, they spent the whole summer with us. I mean, we probably gave them about 4 weeks away from us, but they kept coming back, and they kept wanting to be here and working with the staff. And that's a credit to the coaching staff and my assistants that guys want to be here working with them.
And Fizz, it all goes back to Mark and Mike, though. Those guys are coming off of career seasons when it comes to what they were able to do on the offensive side of the floor. How much do you get them to sort of pick up where they left off last year?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get them to go up another notch. I just never want to put a ceiling on them, and I just felt like systematically we can continue to evolve to put them in better positions. I've spent the year with them getting to know them. They spent the year with me getting to know me. And we went through the ups and downs and the growing pains of that, and I just felt like we're just way further ahead now than we were last year from an expectation standpoint. And they came in that way. Mark playing Euro basketball gave him a head start on a lot of guys. Mike Conley came in about 3 weeks ago, and he is in the best shape he's ever been in the start of the season, I guarantee it, because he understands the load that I'm going to demand from him from an offensive and defensive standpoint. So I expect them to go up a whole nother notch. And obviously with the pace of play, we're going to pick it up some. That's going to create more possessions and more opportunity.
I know you're super excited about Tyreek.
Oh, yeah.
Tyreek and Mike together.
Yeah.
You think it's something that you think it's totally natural fit because, as you said, Mike, there's been so much burden of scoring. You lose Zebo, the points are out of the lineup. Somebody's got to get you buckets.
Yeah.
I'd imagine you're kind of looking at Tyreek as maybe a super six man, or have you decided?
I haven't decided yet with him, but he's definitely going to have a huge role in scoring and making plays for us. For us to get him on the deal that we got him, I feel like he's a steal. And I like I said, I've coached a guy that's like him before, so I really feel confident in the way that I'm going to use him. And Tyreek is so versatile, and he's so big and strong that I can play him, with 2 other guards out there. Right. Just because I don't know if you've seen Tyreek's chest, but you don't want to run into that brick wall. Yeah. And he'll be able to defend, most threes in the league if I wanted to go that route and go smaller and faster. So Tyreek just adds a whole nother dimension of versatility. His coach in New Orleans, a guy named Fred Vincent, assistant coach, worked with him on his shooting. He's he looks night and day as a shooter than he had been throughout his career. And so I'm expecting Tyreek to have a huge year, and I think the fans are going to really love watching him play.
All right, Fizz, before we let you get out of here, I wanted to get an update real quick on Ben. Is he ahead of schedule, right around schedule? Or?
Ahead of schedule. Okay. He's been so diligent about his rehab. We've actually been watching a ton of film with him while he's been out and just trying to fast-track him from a development standpoint, because I see Ben as almost like just a blank piece of paper. He's been through some serious ups and downs out there in Sacramento. Multiple coaches in 4 years, and most kids won't take off in that kind of environment when you have that much turnover. And so I just see a great opportunity for us right now to develop and really grow that talent and really identify a game for him that he can hang his hat on to help us be as good as we can possibly be.
Real quick, how many wins do you think it takes to be a playoff team in the West?
45.
45 gets you in. And number 2, have you begged Wade to stay in the East? Have you told him to go to the Cavs? Everybody knows you guys are friends.
I can't comment on
Blood
what
brothers.
I begged him to do.
We got to keep – all right, here's at the very least. Listen, I'd love to have him. If we can't, you got to just keep
stay
him out
away.
of the way. Stay away.
No,
we'll play with LeBron again. It's fine.
I think we had that discussion overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, showing our toes in Greece. So,
but that
we had
unbelievable.
Yeah, we had a great time, and it's it's all family. He, myself, Udonis Haslam, Gabrielle, their wives. I mean, it was really a awesome experience, and for him to do that and invite me and my wife out there, it just goes to show you the kind of relationships you can build in this day.
It's the best.
Cool. Thanks, Fizz.
Hey,
Okay, so that is the interview Chris Vernon had. He's with the Grizzlies, and that was his interview with Grizzlies coach David Fizdale. And so you heard that he spoke some about some of the transition, again, with Zach and Tony, Chandler Parsons coming off an injury. He talked some about the load that, Mike Conley's got to carry. Didn't talk a whole lot about Marc Gasol, which I found that kind of interesting. But, nonetheless, he did talk some about Tyreek Evans and Mario Chalmers and Ben McLemore and that kind of thing. So it's going to be a new look team for the city of Memphis going into this next season. But I tell you, the way the West is loaded up, man, there's going to be some really good games at FedEx Forum. So if you get a chance to get out and check out Grizzlies games and then support the businesses that do things with the Grizzlies. There's a lot of small businesses, a lot of diverse restaurants, diversity-owned restaurants, and other businesses. So it goes beyond just eating. A lot of times when we look at diversity in businesses, we're a city that loves to eat. And so there's some other ways that that we could be supportive and things like that. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Grizz do. And I think a lot of the key to the season, as a lot of people will tell you, is going to be how Chandler Parsons comes back from the injuries. What are you getting from Mark in terms of down the stretch of the season? So second half of the season, what are you getting from Mark? I think Mike's going to ball out. But, how's that going to look when he's the primary focal point of the other team's defense? And what does Tyreek, what does Tyreek Evans give you, whether off the bench or starting? And, just what is their depth defensively? And, does JaMychal, if he does come back, I think he did sign a deal. So if JaMychal is in that starting lineup, what next step is he taking? And some of the young guys with Harrison and Sheldon and that kind of thing. Brooks is the other guy. There's a kid named Brooks on the team that I can't remember his first name off top, but supposedly he had a really good summer. So don't be surprised if you see some of these guys, some of these cats like that jump right in there. Okay? All right, so to keep this thing moving on the I Really Mean It Show podcast, and again, I'm your host, R.G.B. I want to talk some about business banking. I've come across, and I have a background in this area, so I can speak on it. I've come across in my career a number of businesses that often come to the bank. They usually want to open an account, whether it's some form of checking account, some form of money market, or that sort of thing. And then a lot of businesses want some form of credit. Oftentimes it's a line of credit, or they want a loan because they're purchasing an asset like equipment or a vehicle or something along those lines. And it's important, just to take a quick step back, it's important for, wherever you are in your business, one of the first things you got to do, and many people know how to go and get their tax ID number from the IRS, but you need to separate out your business and personal affairs. And, people often hear that, but in today's time when people look for simplicity and they look for just a way they can kind of circumnavigate doing that for whatever reason, and they often commingle funds. And a lot of people don't think that their business is big enough, or they think they're always going to be kind of small, kind of nickel and diamond, with these real kind of micro businesses. But one of the early things that you should do is to separate out your funds. And so you may say, well, hell, why? And so I'll tell you why. The reason that you should is because in commingling your funds, you're not able to separate out what's tied to the business and what's tied to you personally. And that can come into play from a legality standpoint and just from a structure standpoint if you've got funds commingled. The other thing is you're not able to deposit a check. If someone writes you a check made out to your business, Sampson and Sons, trucking, and all you have is your checking account for Sampson, well, you're not going to be able to do much of anything with that check. No institution's going to cash it for you. You're not going to be able to deposit that into a personal checking account because it's made out to the business. And so you need to be able to have a business checking account. And then it also adds to your ability to do business with other vendors, because other vendors are going to be looking for you to have some kind of business account set up. Now, I'm not into getting into all the, who's the best place to bank and all that kind of thing. Y'all can research that, that yourselves. Y'all got Google and whatnot. So, you got a chance to do that and, check them out. There's a few banks and credit unions out there that have streamlined checking account products and things like that that you can get into and have it be a good fit for your business. But one thing I wanted to make sure that I helped y'all out with too is not just on the deposit side of your business, but on the loan side. The first thing that you need to be able to do is understand the need. And when I say the need is, most bankers will, and if they were on here, they tell y'all that a lot of people come to them and they just ask for stuff. Somebody told them that they needed a $50,000 line of credit. The banks, just like an individual, the bank's not going to subsidize 100% of your risk. I think I'll say that again. The bank is not going to subsidize 100% of the risk for your business. You're the entrepreneur, so you're taking the risk, right? You're not going to get a bank or a credit union, particularly in this environment, to subsidize your risk. So what does that mean? If you're going to take a line of credit, which is designed for short-term liquidity, it's not designed to be a tool that you use to finance a long-term asset. That's why you don't buy a car or a building or things like that solely with a line of credit. One, it's costly because there's a variable interest rate that can fluctuate. And it's a very short term in terms of the actual term of it. It's usually about a 3-year term. before you either have to refinance it or pay it off. So that's not good with an asset that you're looking to keep over a certain period of time. But a lot of people come to the bank or the banks or the credit unions or whatever, or the CDFIs, community development, CDFIs, I'm sorry, community development financial institutions. And they don't have a plan. They don't have a rhyme or reason on what they're looking to do. They don't understand what the need is. And so they come in and they just ask for stuff, hoping that they can get it. I need a $25,000 credit card. I need a $15,000 line of credit. And so what a good banker is going to do is ask you those open-ended, needs-based questions about your business and about yourself personally, about other owners and whatnot, to get a good, holistic understanding, such that they could take that information and give you a good, relevant recommendation based on how you answer those questions. And then in the future, be able to anticipate needs and then be on the forefront as a trusted advisor to provide those to your doorstep for consideration. And in the event that you do want to move forward, that they're expeditious about setting that up for you and then coming back and reassessing that. That's kind of the basis of business banking from the bank's point of view. And so if you've got to come in with the idea that you want to build a relationship with the banker and with the bank, not just come in with your hands out. And too many people come with their hands out and their ass out sometimes, and they've got no plan of what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, what the money's for specifically, and how their business is going to benefit from that equity injection. Now, you could take a step back, and I'm a big proponent of this, because the other thing is a lot of businesses come into the bank and the credit union and they don't need a loan. Everything's not about the acquisition of debt. There's so many different ways that you can finance your business without getting into debt. And I'm the first person to tell you, I've made that mistake enough times that I should be ashamed of it. But I've done it enough times, I'm like, oh, what the hell? But I've spent, a lot of time. I've spent a lot of money running around in businesses in the past where I made that critical mistake of not assessing what I actually needed and thinking that I had to have money and I had to have cash and I had to have, debt from a bank to be able to go do things. And it allowed me to do some great things, but I also made some critical mistakes in that. And many of you may have made those mistakes at some point in time where you bite off a little bit more than you could chew on a line of credit or a term loan or whatnot. And naturally, things don't always go as you like. People don't always respond or pay on time or pay at all. Hell. And now you're on the wrong side of the relationship with the bank or the credit union or whoever you borrowed the money from. And so make sure you assess your business. Is there a way for you to earn money and kind of self-finance, whether it's from your own personal income or savings, whether it's, you're able to get pre-orders, which is a big thing. If you're able to have a product developed and have it sold on a pre-order, if you're able to leverage tools like Amazon and Spotify and Etsy and eBay and all these different places that now allow you to kind of streamline your efforts and have a platform to be able to sell and gain sales without a lot of investment in critical overhead and things like that. I have a book out that's called Legacy Living, and a lot of people that know me on Facebook see me use the hashtag Legacy Living. And I wrote that book several years ago. I was on vacation and started to just write and kind of jot down ideas. And that's where I came up with that hashtag and whatnot. Feel free to use it, by the way. No pride and ownership with that. But by utilizing Amazon, and I have it as an ebook, and you can find it on Amazon, Legacy Living. I never really developed the print copy. But I've been able to sell Actually, as of last week, I've sold over 5,000 copies of the electronic version of that book in about a 2.5 year span. And I did that, no heavy advertising, no browbeating, and I didn't go tag 50 people in every post and all that shit that some of the people do, some of y'all might do, but I did that just with just putting it out there to people and letting them consume it, and I've gotten great feedback from that. But many people have been able to leverage those kind of platforms, right, to be able to get their product or their service out without having to dig in with the bank and get into all the lending piece of it. Now, if you do find out you need that, and I'm not suggesting that being able to finance your business, if you got a business, you got a hobby and you just collecting rocks, or you just like to take pictures and put them on Facebook and all that kind of thing, that's one thing. That's fine. That's have a cute little hobby, and y'all do that. But when you have a business, starts with a B, when you've got a business and you may need to go to the next level in your business, you may need to finance a piece of that. And a debt instrument like a line of credit or a credit card or a term loan, if used properly, again, with the right plan in place, executable plan, and you are able to articulate and understand your business, you have a better chance of getting it. In some cases, even if your credit is somewhat spotty. The reason being is most business owners, as a business owner, here's the thing. You should know your business so well, and you should have your ability to demonstrate and showcase your business in a very quick period of time, 15 to 30 seconds. And within 30 seconds, you should be able to tell me what I need to know about your business, who you target, what's your mission and kind of strategic vision of the business. Some folks that you run into, it take them 45 minutes just to tell you the name of the business or some of the things that I just mentioned. And the reason being is because they don't really know. They're trying to talk themselves into it. And when you try to talk yourself into it, that banker's already figured out you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And those are people that, when you start thinking of the character of the owner and things like that, a lot of that goes into the repayment. And you've heard about the 5 C's of credit and all that kind of stuff for those of you that have been to business school or finance school. But at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, it is about, as a business owner, right, you've got to be able to understand the nature of the business. And you've got to be able to articulate and quantify your business. So the more in command that you are, if you're able to articulate. So for example, you may say, well, I've got a digital newspaper, right? If you've got a digital newspaper, you should be able to tell me fairly quickly the mission and vision of it, who it's designed to target, how many people through some period of time have experienced it or have read it or engaged it, what your social media reach is, and things of that nature. You should be able to quickly articulate that along with your balance sheet and income statement. How much did I generate? How much have I referred? What are my expenses? What are my heartaches? What are the things that keep me up at night? What are some of my successes, whether it's myself, my people combined, things that we do in the community, right? What is the value of those that are stakeholders in my company? I should be able to quickly articulate that. That's information I should know about my business. I should know about the industry. Some of the industry trends. I should read that. Not just looking at half-naked folk on Instagram and in the beard group on Facebook, right? I should be reading on things in my industry. So if I got a digital newspaper, I should be reading about what? Media. I should understand print media, digital media, and everything in between. I should know it. I should know my top competitors are, if you have them, who my top collaborators are or potential collaborators. What are some of the major players doing? What are some of the smaller players are doing? Where do I fit in between all of that? I should know that as a business owner who's also an entrepreneur. And remember, I've told you there's two different things. And in Memphis, people love to combine the two, entrepreneurship and business owner. They can be the same, but they can be mutually exclusive. But from a business banking standpoint, you need to make sure that you register your business, again, if applicable, and based on your structure and things like that, you have the right paperwork, So you have to be able to showcase what it is that you do and how you structure. You need to have an understanding of that. And any partners or any co-owners need to understand that as well. You notice on shows like even Shark Tank and The Profit and things like that, you've got to be able to talk business. It's not a plaything. And so when you're banking for your business, just like you do with your personal banking, you've got to be able to keep those things separate, and you got to have a good understanding. Just like with your personal banking, you need to have an understanding of where do you spend money, and what are your top debts if you have them, and what's your plan for ultimately eliminating that debt, mitigating it and eliminating it. And how do you keep from them picking that debt up again? Some people are just in this perpetual state of just having debt because they always have to have things. They worship things. Automobiles, clothes, and things like that. Jewelry. Status and things like that. They become gluttons and they become lustful for that kind of stuff. But on the personal banking side, you've got to understand the same thing. You got to understand your business. How do you generate income? Right? Do you have different streams and different ways to generate income? And then how are you matching that with your debt structure? Very important. Okay? So I encourage you with your business banking, get with your business banker, look one up if you don't have one, but start next week with getting your business banking in order. Take care of your business, y'all, and you'll find out that things flow much better, but you got to understand your business. When people talk to you about your business, you should light up. That's your baby. You should light up, and you should be able to articulate what that is. Okay? So, just to round out today's show, I do want to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk about some of the landscape in this country with the United States of America and uniting, whether you want to say reuniting, but for many of us in this country, there needs to be first a uniting before you can ever fall out and then have a reuniting. And many would argue, including myself, that this country has never really been united. At least not for everybody. And the comments by the President of the United States, Mr. Donald J. Trump, that he has made publicly, that he made down in Huntsville, Alabama last Saturday, and that he's made via Twitter, which has been his platform for communicating to the masses. And he uses that very well. He used that very well during this campaign, and he used it a lot even when he wasn't a political candidate. He has so far this year, through his campaign, and he's continued as the elected president, that very divisive language and tone and undertone. He has been in most cases, what most people would argue, very offensive to people of color, people of various ethnicities, people of various culture, and then certainly of women. And that is unacceptable from the President of the United States. And there are a lot of people that I think can agree with that. I think some of the people that are supporters of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, are even starting to find it hard to support a lot of the rhetoric that they're hearing, because many people in this country now experience diversity in so many different ways, whether it's closer to home with them now in their families and their friend structure and their daily walk at work and in their business and in whatever religious faction that they choose to be a part of. They experience diversity in so many different ways now. And if you bring that home to Memphis, Memphis is a city that's 65 to 70%, African American or Americans that originate their heritage from the continent of Africa or the Caribbean. And because of that, and Memphis has a rich history in terms of racial equality and racial relationships that spans from its creation as a city and chartering as a city to right now today. And, Memphis can play a role in how this country becomes united. Here's the reason. And I want y'all to scoot up and listen to this clearly. Here's the reason how Memphis can play a role. Memphis can play a role because of one of the statistics I gave in terms of this being a city that is a heavy Americans from Africa based city in terms of population. And there's a lot of segmentation now that's used by race that's kind of transitioned to a little bit more of an economic battle, obviously over the last 30, 40 years as the economy has changed, and certainly has changed in Memphis. There's no doubt about that. But Memphis can play a role because Memphis sits kind of in an area where it's surrounded by a lot of people who do not support diversity. They support a very homogenous existence, and that's kind of permeated around this country, that people cannot just simply agree to disagree, that there's this very adversarial tone and approach and spirit to life in America, that either you're on someone's side and you agree with them wholeheartedly, and then if you don't, then you're the enemy and you are either less than or you are not a part of what's going on and should be ostracized. And that's a very dangerous place to be in a country that should be as progressive as the United States is. However, that isn't always the case. So I want you to hear from San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich, who I've had the pleasure to meet during my young days when I played a little ball. And I had a chance to spend a little time in San Antonio about 17 years ago, and got a chance to meet and be yelled at by Coach Popovich. But he makes some very, very interesting comments concerning this particular subject around President Donald Trump and, whether it's the NFL's stance or lack of stance, whatever, depending on the team and the player and the owner, and just the overall tone of this country. He makes some very poignant comments. So here is Coach Popovich with the San Antonio Spurs doing media day for the team.
Obviously, race is the elephant in the room, and we all understand that. But unless it is talked about constantly, it's not going to get better. People get bored. Oh, is it that again? They pull in the race card again. Why do we have to talk about that? Well, because it's uncomfortable. And there has to be an uncomfortable element in the discourse for anything to change. Whether it's the LGBT movement or, women's suffrage, race, it doesn't matter. People have to be made to feel uncomfortable, and especially white people, because we're comfortable. It's like you're at the 50-meter mark in a 100-meter dash, and you got that kind of a lead. Yes, because you were born white, you have advantages that are systemically, culturally, psychologically there. And they have been built up and cemented for hundreds of years. People want to hold their position. People want the status quo. People don't want to give that up. And until it's given up, it's not going to be fixed. I think that we do live in a difficult time, and it doesn't do a whole lot of good. We all know the situation, and it gets beaten up every day by talking heads, and it starts to get personal. And I think we all know why. We all know where the source is, where a lot of the division comes from. But to dwell on that sometimes I think is the wrong way to go, because it's so obvious now. It's boring. The childishness and the gratuitous fear-mongering and race baiting has been so consistent that it's almost expected. The bar has been lowered so far that I think it's more important to be thinking about what to do at a more organic, roots-based, level. Thinking about the efforts to restrict voter registration. Comments that demean cultures, ethnic groups, races, women, those sorts of things. What can be done in an organic way to fight that? Because we know how everything happens. We know where the power in the country is. We know the racism that exists. But it's gone beyond that to the point where I'm more worried about and more confused by the people around our president. These are intelligent people who know exactly what's going on, who were basically very negative about his actions, but now it seems that it's condoned. And we saw it this weekend with his comments about people that should be fired or people that shouldn't be allowed to do this sort of thing. I wonder what the people think about who voted for him, where their line is, how much they can take, where does the morality and the decency kick in. And I understand very well, they didn't like their choice. Economically, a lot of people had a problem. And he was the right guy at the right time to tap into that mood. And people overlooked one hell of a lot to be able to pull that trigger and vote in that direction. But it was because they wanted change. They felt ignored. They actually thought something would happen that would aid them. But at what price is the question. And as we see the actions over and over and over again, one wonders what is in their heads, and have they come to the conclusion that they had the wrong vehicle. They might have had good ideas and good reasons why they wanted to go the way they went, but someone else that had a little bit more decency about how they approach other people and other groups might have served better. And that's what I worry about in the country. You wonder about if you live where you thought you lived. I just heard a comment this morning from a NASCAR owner and from Mr. Petty that just blew me away. Just blew me away. Where the owner described the fact that he would get the Greyhound bus tickets for anybody to leave and they'd be fired. And Mr. Petty, who said people who act the way we saw on Sunday, they should leave the country. That's where I live. I had no idea that I lived in a country where people would actually say that sort of thing. I'm not totally naive, but I think these people have been enabled by an example that we've all been given. And you've seen it in Charlottesville and on and on and on. That's not a surprise. Get over it. What do we do to get it done? To go to the grassroots and not allow this to happen again. Our country's an embarrassment in the world. This is an individual who actually thought that when people held arms during the games that they were doing it to honor the flag. That's delusional. Absolutely delusional, but it's what we have to live with. So you got a choice. We can continue to bounce our heads off the wall with his conduct, or we can decide that the institutions of our country are more important, that people are more important, that the decent America that we all thought we had and want is more important, and get down to business at the grassroots level and do what we have to do. I guess that's enough for now.
Okay, so that was San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich giving his thoughts or his kind of response to President Donald Trump's comments on last weekend and whatnot. And so very interesting take that he has. Could you imagine playing for a guy like Greg Popovich and he makes that kind of comment in support of this country and speaking out against the bigotry and the divisiveness that's been taking place? Could you imagine that guy? And this is a white man talking now. This isn't, this wasn't Roland Martin or something like that. This wasn't, Fred Hampton or something like that. This is, this is a man that's made millions of dollars with a large majority of very diverse players that they've had at San Antonio. If you look at San Antonio's rosters over the last, 15, 20 years, he's had, Hall of Fame level players like Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili and those kind of things that are from France and Argentina, Tim Duncan from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And you go on and on around their roster. They've had several foreign-born players that have been able to make rosters with them and be able to get playing time and be in rotation. And like I said, in a few cases, have all-star and Hall of Fame level kind of careers. And so for him to come out and speak in that kind of tone was really eye-opening for me. Coach Steve Kerr with the Golden State Warriors has made statements, and many other people, not just famous people, but even people here at the local level in Memphis that are making statements against statues and things like that, and various groups that are really engaging at the grassroots level. And again, it's not about just forcing this adherence, but there has to be a conversation. And you heard Coach Popovich talk about the uncomfortableness of that conversation. And I relate that back to Memphis because Memphis has come a good way in terms of bringing a little bit more of that conversation to the forefront. But there's still some work that needs to be done. It needs to be a very holistic conversation. It doesn't just need to be about black and white and things like that. Everybody needs to be able to come to the table. From the various ethnicities, the various cultures and things like that, and have a real true blue conversation. But not just a conversation that ends in, someone getting the last word and then you go on, but a conversation that leads to some kind of action plan, right? That then at some point leads to an executable plan that then you come back and you reassess and then there's something moving on. But the debating into playing on people's fear is not new. I mean, y'all know that's not new. And every president has had to deal with it or been part of it. But when your president then is part of the platform that's an initiator of it, of divisiveness and supporting bigotry, that's where people have to stand up and not just allow it to just be numb to it, right? That, that's just him again tweeting, or he's just like that. Because at the end of the day, I think there's really something on the horizon that's going to come for people here in America if we don't get this right. And other nations are looking at us like damn, these people have been at this for hundreds of years now. They can't figure out how to live in kind of a harmony kind of setting. They can't seem to figure that out in America. There's too much fear and hatred amongst people when they don't look alike, or they don't sound alike, or they don't view the world the same way, or they don't grow up in the same kind of environments, even within the country. And so I'll kind of wrap up this podcast by just pleading out to those that are listening that a sincere dialogue needs to take place. It needs to be a candid dialogue. It needs to be low on emotion, and it needs to be high on understanding and visibility, right, and transparency. And then we need to get the truth on the table. We need to deal with it, and then we need to have an executable plan. This is not about social media posts. It's not about people measuring their bravado, right? It's not about, can I get seen on TV, or how much money can I raise on this or that to try to build my own prestige or my own personal persona, or my name have it attached with something, or just simply to be seen on TV or heard on the radio and all that kind of thing. It needs to be bigger than that. And, I issue this challenge in Memphis that we have a great opportunity to be on the forefront of that given our history, right? And if we could do that, I think, opportunity is really going to come our way, because then we can show an innovation. May not be techie and that kind of thing, but if we can be on the forefront of a homogenous racial integration and understanding that all cultures should be celebrated, people should be allowed freely to express their culture, learn about their culture, the true nature of it, the true history of it, and have it be respected, right? And even the President of the United States should be respecting it and should be supporting that diverse level of thought and approach to the world. And then each culture needs to embrace its own view of economic development and economic platforms, and not have this reliance on one culture, with another, and trying to make people subservient and things like that. We've got to rise beyond that. And I always, look, and I'm on the forefront. I'm not a very vocal person. This is kind of a platform, of course, for me to be that. But I'm not a person that goes and just makes Facebook posts all day talking about why people doing this and doing that and all that stupid shit, right? And it is funny to see, knowing that, who are the top owners of things like Facebook. It's always funny when people get so woke that they do it on a platform that's owned by, But I'm one of the owners. I'm a very small owner in Facebook. Very small. Very small. And some of you are as well if you own shares in Facebook or whatnot. But, let's look to be better than this. And don't allow the President of the United States example to shape for us and for our children. Let's teach them and show them better. And I think that if we do that, we'll make this place, a phenomenal place over time. And, we need to come to the table and not be so closed-minded. And this is for all cultures. All cultures should be open-minded and get a good understanding of a culture, not just how they look, and try to market how they look or how they talk or how they sing or how they rap or how they make people laugh or how they run a ball up and down the field and catch a ball and dribble a ball and shoot a ball and hit a ball and run with a ball and all that kind of stuff. So not just being vultures who come and suck up a culture, for our own profitable gain, but understand a culture so that we can respect it, understand it, and share it with our children so they have a holistic view and a holistic respect for the next man and the next woman and the next boy and the next girl. So hope y'all enjoyed today's show and today's podcast. I really mean it. I'm your host, R.G.B. And I hope y'all also like the intro too. Make sure that you get up with us on Facebook. I really mean it show with R.G.B. And again, subscribe, download the podcast, share it with your friends and family, iTunes, YouTube, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, and we're going to be doing what we do, baby, all day long. The very best of Memphis with the best of Memphis. R.G.B. You guys have a great weekend. Peace.
Your host, I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host, I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host, R.G.B.